Welcome to Das One Hunt. I'm Jean-Pierre Ruth for Information Week. And in this episode, we're going to be taking a look at whether or not AI in software development has gone too far. There's been some idea of a promise that introducing AI, particularly in some ways elements of generative AI, into the software development cycle could bring newer types of efficiency into this space. But whether or not the reality of that has actually come to fruition is another story. There's, automation in software development isn't exactly a new thing, but the rise of AI and generative AI certainly has introduced various elements. Sometimes earlier on there have been some stumbles along the way. But to dissect and take a closer look at this topic, we have brought together Matt Bishop, Principal Architect at Bitwarden, Artem Kroupenev, Vice President of Strategy at Augury.
Hi, everyone.
Matias Madou, Secure Code Warriors CTO and co-founder.
Thanks for having me.
And Joel Carusone, Senior Vice President of Data and AI at NinjaOne.
Thanks for having me as well.
All of you, thank you so much for being here today. Okay, all right. So AI in software development. Artem, can you give us your thoughts on, what are some of the expectations for AI usage in the development space? What does the C-suite want? Do they want more AI to kind of be a play to help speed up software delivery? What are some of the thoughts and expectations that seem to be happening there?
So I think that some of the C-suites, I would say, or the leadership within companies is more forward-looking. So and kind of are leading the space. So within that realm of more forward-looking, CEOs, executives, I think there are three different categories in the way we would look at AI, specifically AI development. The first one is around augmentation. It's all about productivity, right? And you can think about it as, right now at Augury, but 10-20% of the code is being generated and supervised. But then as these platforms have more and more context and maybe understand the intent behind what we want to do, we'll move to 50% code, maybe 60 and more. And then we start moving towards, going from developers using it as a tool to potentially kind of more of like a human in the loop software development, where developers become editors, curators, whereas the majority of the code that gets generated. That's a huge boost to productivity, and that also changes the way we think about how we develop products. The second part is I can call it companionship, but maybe it's more around like symbiotic learning or tutoring, right? Where the tool also becomes a tutor of sorts. And so as you start using more and more of these AI capabilities, where it was like Cursor or GitHub Copilot, you can also start asking what's a better way to solve that problem. And then the tool itself evolves with you in a way. And so it becomes a fundamental part, not just of how we develop products, become more productive, but also how we learn to code and solve these problems better. And so going forward, you can think about it as if you want your developer workforce to become better at developing products, you have to use these tools as part of how they run the guilds and learn basically better ways of solving problems. And the third part is this concept of democratization, where anyone can start using and get access to it. And I think that is more of a fundamental difference in take on what the workforce could do in the future. Whereas today, simply, we have people from business intelligence, from BI, using development resources to get, generate a report. We tell them, well, have you tried, like a ChatGPT generated code to call the API and get your report now? You can do it yourself. You don't need a developer for it. If you take that a little bit further in the future, then it becomes, a way more accessible for people who do not hold programming developing roles to do development tasks within the organization. And that changes the way you start thinking about hiring people and what different departments and roles can do, right? And so I think that's a big shift in taking service and making it into software. So like service as software kind of thinking around the way your workforce will operate in the future. So I think those are the three pieces, right? Augmentation, I would say companionship, and then democratization of how development works. That's the strategic outlook on I would say how the C-suite would think about integrating these types of tools into the way the company operates.
Gotcha. Awesome. Appreciate your insights on that. Matt, how does security feel about AI in software development? Does its inclusion elevate potential risks? Because now you've got another wing, widget in there doing its thing.
Yeah, the democratization angle just now from Artem made me think exactly about that, which is that we have this huge surge of how do I use AI, maybe without necessarily understanding the business value proposition of what it's going to bring you. Citizen development, like was mentioned, being one of those angles, but in most practical cases, you need to consider the other elements of what it takes to build a platform, use a platform, et cetera. And that's where that security lens really has to come in there. You're not most likely going to use an API, for example, without needing some kind of authentication or credentials. And there's been a bit of a, again, surge of throw my data into the platform and AI will tell me things. But there are something like 30 to 50% of organizations that have played around with that have started to throw in rather privileged information into their platforms that with AI, and secrets are being brought in there, confidential information. So we have to think about the compliance and governance of what that data alone is being put into, as well as the actual access methods for that. You can create a really great mine of data if you're not working that in a smart direction. And so for us, it's been about shifting left a little bit with security at the forefront of AI usage. I certainly agree on the companionship model about it can be a great tool to work with you, but you do need to put the right governance and controls in place for what the tool can really get to and how it's going to enable your work. You can go a little bit too far, I think, in some cases. And in our experience to date is that it's that assistant, it's that way to be your pair, but it's not necessarily going to give you the entire answer. We want to shift things like code review to be a partnership. We want implementation to be a partnership with these sorts of tools, as opposed to being the answer. You really need to have some human lenses on these things as they roll out. Otherwise, you're going to miss things. You're going to have leaks. You're going to have breaches, and you can really get yourself in some trouble. So security really is at the forefront of the introduction of these tools into the workspace.
Awesome. Appreciate your thoughts on that. Joel, what do software developers want to focus on when it comes to their responsibilities? What tends to get in the way of that? And, if we can speak to, does AI speak to kind of freeing up, some of those things that might be getting in the way?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that's the intent here, and the Holy Grail is if you can give somebody back 15-20% of their day by either automating repetitive tasks, preventing them from having to hit Stack Overflow to look at how to implement something, like that's where the true value of AI really lives at this point. There are, some really powerful IDEs now that have language model capabilities like built into them. So imagine, I think as Artem and Matt have talked about, like 60% of the code at some point will be able to be generated by the language models themselves. That's a huge time savings. At the same time, you also have new opportunities for engineers. A lot of folks during their schooling or in their careers have interest in AI, have done some studying of AI, and are now using some of these tools in their personal life and really seeing the value of them. Now being able to take that that desire or that interest and being able to bring it to the workforce, allowing people to up level. I think the educational aspect of this is huge. Taking somebody that may be earlier in their career and giving them the superpower of being a more mid or senior level engineer with just access to a couple of additional tools. That's, I think, really where the value is for engineers, and I think ultimately why there's a lot of interest in continuing to roll those tools out throughout the organization.
Gotcha. Thank you very much for that. Matthias, does AI deliver, or does it fall short in terms of its usefulness in software development, at least in the here and now? And if you want to speak, we'll speak to where we're going as we go on.
Absolutely. So I think first of all, AI is nothing new, right? It became more prominent in 2021 when OpenAI created ChatGPT. Then the world was suddenly like, oh my God, that's what AI is capable of doing. So that's when it became more visible to people. So for a long time, we're working on AI. And I think that the pace of improvements in AI is steady. and it's not going super fast, right? I would have, most people in 2021 thought the world would change completely because of AI, and it will, but it takes clearly a lot more time than we anticipated. Sure, like if you think about software development, you see a lot of layoffs, but that's not necessarily related to AI, right? There's other things that play in the market. That's not necessarily through AI. So you may wonder, like, is it beneficial? Does it help? One thing that I would like to point out is if you think about software development and AI, the biggest enemy of software development is no consistency. Having no consistency is the biggest enemy because software developers always want to do the thing in the same way. And with AI, it's quite hard. As we know, these models will improve. Generative AI will improve, but today it's really, really hard to get consistency, always the same good answer. So here's my thinking about, does it help? Does it not help? I feel that software developers, good software developers that know their stuff, they are going to go faster by using AI solutions. And 15% was mentioned over here, 30%, 50% was mentioned over here. I don't know what the number is, but good software developers, they will know exactly what questions to ask, and they will know exactly what pieces of information to take. Unskilled software developers, they will just be dangerous. AI in the hands of, unskilled software developers, that's going to be just dangerous. IDEs are embedding AI solutions in there. It's a real thing. So people are just going to ask the AI solution, what do I do here? It's going to give an answer, and they're just going to copy paste that answer and push it into the stack, and that's going to be it. So they are just going to create problems, security problems at rapid speed. So that is the crux for me. I think good developers, and the nicest analogy that I can come up with is we all have a calculator. Does that mean we no longer need to know about math? No, AI is just, the calculator is just helping us. We know about math, but we go faster by using a calculator. We know exactly how to use a calculator. And I think AI, yes, it's way more powerful than a calculator, but it's a very similar tool that we can use in day-to-day development. But we need to know how to use that tool.
Awesome. Thank you very much for insight on that. And each of you, thank you for your individual input on those questions. Now, for all of you, I'm actually going to, based on what Matias was just saying, I'm going to pull something in his head for later in the lineup of questions and bring it up to the top. What does AI mean for citizen developers? Because that's been a movement that's really, in recent years has been, kind of like talked up. Before a lot of talk about AI started really before. We're talking about citizen developers making use of various automation platforms for some simpler types of coding. Is it taking what Matias was just saying and then also kind of like looking at the movement and potentials for AI, is it really worth kind of like continuing to kind of like prep citizen developers now that AI is in place? Like, do we need citizen developers, or looking at what Matias is, the concerns that Matias was bringing up? What does this say to this space? All of you, any of you, please dive in.
Go ahead, Matt.
Thank you. So Matias mentioned the training data, essentially, as I see it, and Stack Overflow. So in the software community, we joke sometimes about, oh, well, that's obviously a Stack Overflow answer because it may be overly simplistic or have some really glaring flaws in whatever it may be. And that's, again, the simple versus the difficult. And so I think training data is really important with whatever you give these tools. And the best AI platforms, at least for helping with development, are ones that you can point at your own code base. And a lot of what I think about is architecture and how do we create that consistency? How do we create the patterns and practices and, again, the companionship? And so it's really important to give the tool, the data set, and the code base, really, that you would like for it to follow and model to create those patterns and practices, and the quote right answer, or the best that you can get it type answer, because quality of the training is so critical to these language models. And you're not going to get what you want out of it if you're not giving it the right feedback. And some of these have been very brute force today.
To listen to the entire conversation, look for the DOS 100 podcast on Spreaker, Spotify, Amazon Music, and other popular podcast platforms.